In the previous sections, Wife of Bath has already introduced us with her fifth husband, that is Jenkin, and she told us that this man, the clerk from Oxford, he came back to where Wife of Bath lived, and he stayed on rent in one of Wife of Bath's friend, that gossip mate Alison's house, and that's how they came to know each other. And one day, when her husband was not in the town during Lent, uh, all of them, the three, Wife of Bath, her gossip mate Alison, and Jenkin the clerk, they went out for a walk. It was a pleasant spring season, and there they were having beautiful conversations and flirting each other, where Wife of Bath had already silently proposed that if she were a widow, then Jenkin the clerk could have married her, and she acted as if she is totally enchanted by the young clerk Jenkin, and she said that it is always nice to have to keep a backup, because you don't know when you need it. When it comes to a husband, even then it's good always to keep a backup. And that's how we come to this section, and here we are going to see uh, that she actually needs the backup now, because her fourth husband has died. And that's how this section is called the funeral of the fourth husband. Let's start with the text now. When my fourth husband lay upon his bier, I wept enough and made but sorry cheer, as wives must always, for its custom's grace, and with my kerchief covered up my face. So she says, so when my fourth husband was dead, lay upon his bier after death, I wept enough, I cried as much was required, because wives were required to put on a sorry face when their husband died. And she cried as much as required, and she wept enough, and acted really sad and kept a sad face. Because this was the custom for their wives, for the wives. They needed to be in mourning, and they needed to be sad, even if they are not so. They had to show that they are sad. And likewise, Wife of Bath, she did everything that wives were supposed to do, like covering her face with a black scarf, as in mourning, uh, the relatives of the person dead, they wear black clothes when they are in mourning. The wife of the man, if the man is dead, his wife was supposed to cover her face with a black scarf, a black handkerchief, and that's what she followed, because this was the custom. But this was the custom and tradition and law. This wasn't feeling. Wife of Bath wasn't actually having any feeling for that sort for for her dead husband, because this was the man she had tried to love, but this was also the man who never loved her back. Instead, this man, this fourth husband, kept a mistress and went on to sleep with other women, which made Wife of Bath very jealous. So this man had never been so kind to her. So Wife of Bath, now that her husband, the fourth husband, was dead, she was not feeling a thing. She was just making up this sadness, putting on this show of sadness and mourning, as was required by the custom, by the tradition. No feelings at all in this mourning. But since I was provided with a mate, I really wept but little, I may state. And there was another reason why she was actually not that sad, actually not mourning in reality, because she already had eyes on the next husband. She already had a backup ready. That is the Jenkin, the clerk from Oxford. She already had her eyes on her, and Jenkin was the backup in case something happens to the husband. And now is the time. She knows that she has a backup. So she is not really worried that the husband has gone, the fourth husband has gone. To church my man was borne upon the morrow by neighbours, who for him made signs of sorrow, and Jenkin, our good clerk, was one of them. So next day, the body of my dead husband was taken to the church. The fourth husband's body was taken to the church for his last rites, like in Christianity, and it was taken by the neighbors, and the neighbors were all in mourning because the husband had died, and they made signs of sorrow. They were in mourning, and interestingly, Jenkin was also there among the neighbors who were mourning the dead husband. So help me God, when rang the requiem after the bier, I thought he had a pair of legs and feet so clean cut and so fair that all my heart I gave to him to hold. So the irony is that when the sermons, when the dead body is taken to the church, there is a mass that is being held, and the sermons are being played, the requiem. It was playing in the church, and there lies the fourth husband's coffin, the bier, the dead body within the coffin. And when all this was happening and everyone was in mourning, wife of Bath was just looking at Jenkin's fine pair of legs, and she wondered how muscular they were, how chiseled, how handsome Jenkin's legs were. And she was attracted, and she was so falling in love with Jenkin at that very moment when the last rites, when the funeral of the fourth husband was going on. This is the irony of the moment. He was, I think, but 20 winters old. Now, after just a few lines talking about the fourth husband who was dead, wife of Bath totally moves the narrative to Jenkin, because that's what was now more important to her. Jenkin, the clerk, was going to be the fifth husband, and he was more important to her than the dead body of the fourth husband. So, although this is the funeral of the fourth husband, wife of Bath's focus, her sole focus, is on Jenkin, who is her future. He was, I think, but 20 winters old, and I was 40, if I tell the truth. But then I always had a young colt's tooth. Now, there is, of course, a massive age difference between Jenkin the clerk and wife of Bath, because wife of Bath, she started getting married at the age of 12, and now she has lived through four marriages. Now that the fourth husband was dead, wife of Bath has lived through four marriages. And in contrast to her, who after four marriages, wife of Bath was a middle-aged lady, of course. And contrast to her, Jenkin the clerk was only half her age. He was 20 years old and in his prime. But always, wife of Bath, she had a young colt's tooth. She always had a fetish, an attraction for young men, for younger men. So now is the opportunity. The fourth husband is now dead. The road is clear, and Jenkin also has some kind of feeling for wife of Bath. So everything was falling in place for her again. Gap-toothed I was, and that became me well. I had the print of holy Venus's seal. So help me God, I was a healthy one, and fair and rich, and young and full of fun. And truly, as my husbands all told me, I had the silkiest ponium that could be. Now, wife of Bath said that I was gap-toothed. Now, in medieval age, this gap between the front teeth that some people have, both men and women have that kind of teeth setup. And people said that if there is a gap between the front teeth, especially in a woman, she is going to be a very lustful character. It was associated with the women's lustful character. This was in the medieval age. It some kind of a superstition. And so wife of Bath was gap tooth, and now that we are almost near the end, we have no lack of evidence that wife of Bath was extremely lustful and horny. But anyway, this is just a superstition. And she says that she had a print of Holy Venus's seal, and she had a sign of Venus. Sign of Venus she had, and Venus, the goddess, was considered the goddess. Sorry, this is a mistake. It's not god, it's goddess. Venus was the goddess of love and sex. And because wife of Bath had the sign of Venus, she was also associated always with love and sex. And she says that I was a healthy one, I was a lusty one, I was promiscuous. Promiscuous is someone who is always ready for sexual experience. And she says that I was fair and rich and young and full of fun. So she was still pretty, although she was 40 years old. She was still pretty and she was rich now, because this was her scheme that she will marry old men and take their property. So now she had married 4 times. So she must be very rich, because all the properties from all the 4 previous husbands is now in her name. So she was very rich. And she's still youthful and full of fun, because that's how jolly she is. She is extremely full of spirit. She was a spirited, happy-go-lucky, jolly woman. And as my husbands all told me, I had the silkiest ponium that could ever be. Now, because she was married to 4 previous husbands, she had have ample of sexual experience, and all her previous 4 husbands used to say that she could offer the best sex possible. She was wonderful in bed, wife of Bath. And all these characters, that she was rich and young and full of fun, and she could offer the best sex, she had wonderful body, and that makes the wife of Bath a perfect wife whom anyone would want to marry. No one would now deny to marry wife of Bath. That's how her profile was. She was really up for the marriage, and as we know, Jenkin will not refuse her too. For truly, I am all Venusian in feeling, and my brain is Martian. Venus gave me my lust and my licorishness, and Mars gave me my sturdy hardiness. Taurus was my ascendant with Mars therein. Now, from this section onwards, it will deal with the medieval preoccupation with astrology. Astrology, as you know, it's the sign of stars and planets, and how the stars and planets that are around the earth actually have effect on every individual being, and they create their characteristics and go on to pave the way for their fortune. So we understand from this part of the text that the study and practice and belief in astrology was rampant from in the Middle Ages, because otherwise why would Chaucer go on to do this whole extensive section about astrology? So this was the medieval preoccupation with astrology and horoscope. Horoscope, as you know, they make your horoscope according to your date of birth and all other things like that in astrology. And Chaucer uses the stars, the zodiac signs, and the horoscope that influences one's personality. And Even wife of Bath uses it to justify her character. Chaucer uses it to justify wife of Bath's character. So from this section onwards, we'll see this preoccupation with astrology and horoscope. The first is that wife of Bath said that I am all Venusian. And Venusian means Venus being the guiding star. And I am all Venusian in feeling, and my brain is Martian. So, wife of Bath had two guiding stars according to astrology. One was Venus, and she was the Venusian because Venus was her guiding star, and Venus was the guiding star of feeling. And when it comes to feeling, wife of Bath, it was the trait of lust and sex and love, because she is so lustful, and this is because Venus itself was the goddess of love and sex and lust and sensuality. And the other guiding star she had was Mars, and Mars is a planet which is associated with intellect. And because Mars was, she says that my brain is Martian, and another part of her was guided by this planet Mars, which is associated with intellect, and that gives her her boldness and her intelligence. So she was a perfect balance of the two. On one hand, the Venusian, which gave her this sensuality, this feeling of lust, love, and sex. And on the other hand, she was also a Martian, and Mars, being a planet of intellect, according to astrology, gave her the boldness and intellect. And Taurus was my ascendant. Taurus was my ascendant, so Taurus was her zodiac sign, and Taurus, in some way, how astrology interprets it, when a woman is have the zodiac sign of Taurus, she is usually self-indulgent and sensual. So this is what a Taurus woman look like. Of course, please do not relate your personal zodiac signs with this, because this is only superstition and a kind of belief that happened in the medieval age. So that was it. A wife of Bath was Taurus. Alas, alas, that ever love was sin. I followed always my own inclination by virtue of my natal constellation. So she says that can love ever be called sin? Because by this time you might have started to judge her, because how fallen a woman might be, that when the funeral of her fourth husband is still ongoing, and even the coffin is not buried, she has already started lusting over another man and is being attracted to his finely chiseled muscular legs, and thinking of how she has kept a backup, and now she is going to marry that backup. So, how fallen she is, you must be thinking. But now she is trying to justify herself. She says, can love ever be called sin? Even if a lady falls in love with another man in the time during which the funeral of her previous husband is ongoing, but still, please do not call it sin. Please do not call it her fault, because love can never be sin. And I always follow my own inclination. I just follow my desires. That's it. She always follows her own heart. And this was written in my stars, because, as she has said, she is a Venusian and a Martian. She is a perfect balance of sensuality and boldness and intellect, because she was Venusian and Martian at the same time, and Taurus was her zodiac sign. So this, she says that this is how I am, and it is written in my stars. So wife of Bath kind of justifies her nature, her character, with the medieval concepts and beliefs of astrology, which wrought me so I never could withdraw my Venus chamber from a good fellow. So because of my lusty nature, because I am Venusian, which gave me the lusty nature, I could never withdraw my love from a handsome fellow. So once I set my eyes on a handsome fellow, I could never withdraw from him. So I'll have to lust after Jenkin, the clerk. Yet have I Mars's mark upon my face, and also in another private place. For God so truly my salvation be, as I have never loved for policy, but ever followed my own appetite. So she now reveals some personal stuff about her. She says that I have a Mars's mark. Mars is a planet that is also associated with the color red. So she says that I have a red birthmark on my face that is called the Mars's mark. And also because she is a Martian, and that can be reflected on her face with this red birthmark, and also in another private place. So also in her private parts she had a similar birthmark, and she reveals that to us. God so truly my salvation be, and now she says that let God be my judge for my behavior, for lusting after another young man at my husband's funeral. You don't judge me, let God judge me. And I have never loved for policy. She's trying to justify her position. She says that I have never loved for policy. I have never considered rules when it comes to love. She is pure at heart. She never considered these rules when it comes to love. There is no rule that you cannot marry for 5 times. There is no rule that you cannot fall in love for so many times. And there is also no rule that you cannot fall in love with another man when the funeral of your fourth husband is still going. So she never considered these rules when it comes to love. She didn't follow the standards. She didn't follow the protocols, because she truly believes that love can never ever be sin. And she only ever followed my own appetite. She only followed her heart. She only followed her desires of the heart, desires of the heart and the body. So that's how she is. And the next section is one really beautiful section in Wife of Bath, and it tremendously breaks the image of Wife of Bath as a very calculating, shrewd, rather wicked woman. She says that though I do not consider these rules when it comes to love, though he were short or tall, or black or white, I took no heed, so that he cared for me. How poor he was, not even of what degree. And that's what makes the character of Wife of Bath so multidimensional. It makes her character so bright and wonderful. She says that I didn't care, because I never followed these protocols, these rules when it comes to love. And she is not even a hypocrite. She says that I really do not follow any protocols when it comes to love. It's not only that I am going lusting after this woman when during my husband's funeral, but I also do not follow any other rules, any other standards. I don't care if my lover was tall or short. I do not care if my lover is fair or dark. I only care if he loved me and cared for me. That's only thing that matters to her. And I didn't even care if he was rich and poor. And with this, we realize that finally, Wife of Bath is actually in love, maybe for the first time, because the previous marriages was just marriage, they were not love. This is the first time she is actually in love with Jenkin. And the previous marriage, as we have read, it was exclusively to get the money, and she therefore had chosen rich old men so that she could get the money. But when it comes to love and not marriage, and here at this point we really dissociate love from marriage. Every marriage is not about love as it is believed, and every love might not lead to marriage, but they still remain as love. So see, she clearly dissociates love from marriage. And when it comes to marriage, she will marry for money. But when it comes to love, she doesn't care if the man was rich or poor. She only cared if the man loved her and cared for her. Or even what degree of status, what degree of class he was from, even what education what he has had. She doesn't care for anything at all when it comes to love. So this section kind of proves that wife of Bath, maybe she has hardened with the experience of her marriages and failed marriages and the position of women in medieval ages, because if she could actually get proper education, if she was equal with men in a free society, she wouldn't be so bitter about her marriages. But actually she isn't so bitter, because when it comes to love, we understand that she is clearly a romantic at heart. So this is a kind of a different portrayal, a different side of wife of Bath's character that is revealed in this section. So here we come to the end of this section. We'll continue with the next.